Our first reflection will be shared by Lucero Curiel, who is a manager of our early college programs, dual enrollment, followed by Dortricia Adelise, a student services specialist from admissions and records, and then Janine Bassett, senior specialist in instruction and academic affairs, will share her reflection. Thank you, Lucero, for getting us started.
Hi, everyone. So as we're talking about leaders, there have been many leaders that have inspired me and have taught me many lessons. Currently, my most inspirational leader is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, U.S. Representative, who has been extremely inspirational in many ways. And regardless of her political stance, I really admire her courage for standing up for not only the working class in the U.S., but also for women and for herself. She has shown many women and girls that their voices are strong as long as they use them. She has given me the courage to speak my mind, to express my emotions in a professional and formal manner, and to prioritize my health. I have always struggled with my confidence and with speaking my mind, and watching her be so vulnerable has shown me that sometimes it is important to be vulnerable in order to make a change, whether that change is professional or personal. Currently, I am a committee member for the Linda Rosenthal Women's Mentor Program in the Maricopa District. And as a committee member, my responsibility is to provide research information via articles and videos that focus on self-development, both professionally and personally. And I will continue to take leadership training opportunities to eventually be a resource to other women and students here at Rio Salado. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucero. And now we'll hear from Dortricia Adelis from Rio Salado's Admissions and Records Department.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'd like to take a moment to reflect on the importance of intersectionality and how we use that responsibly. I'm going to share a story about inspiration from college. Inspiration comes in many forms and not always as you expect. But inspiration is a neutral thing. It doesn't say whether it's good or bad, but it is up to the person to receive and use whatever their experiences are to either move them forward or backwards. As a freshman in college at 18, I flew across the country like so many other students. And my freshman year, my mentor, who was assigned to me, was this wonderful professor named Julie Impre. As a green student, I turned in my first assignment and she graded that assignment and returned it back to me, and I eagerly accepted it, and it had a C-. Now, as a student who'd always gotten A's, I wasn't expecting that. I went to her and asked for feedback, constructive feedback, so that I could be a better student like so many of us. And when we sat there together, she looked across to me and looked at my duress and said, "You shouldn't be upset because Black students don't have a history of strong writing." Now, the people who anchored me in that moment of complete duress, and although I knew my brain, my rational 18-year-old brain knew that was a lie, I fell on the legacy of Maya Angelou. I fell on the legacy of Octavia Butler. I fell on the legacy of Zora and Tony and so many other prolific African-American writers. And it was that helped me go through those next 4 years and not give up and dismiss. Even though I was affected by that statement, I made it through. It inspired me to not let those words define me. And so as a professional years later in academia, it is my responsibility, and one that I take, to make sure that I see students, that I see young women and older women in their commitment to their own professional growth. And I remind them that they are worthy, they are validated, that their feelings and their thoughts matter. And I encourage them to speak up and have a voice. And that is my commitment to the work that we do here to continue to push forward her story. Thank you.
And thank you, Dortricia. Finally, let me introduce Janine Bassett from Instruction and Academic Affairs.
Thank you, Sherry. Let me turn on my microphone, that helps. As I reflect on Women's History Month, I think about all the women that have come before me to pave the way for my opportunities and success. The slideshow was such a powerful example of women who have done amazing things, many in very difficult times. One woman who has been a particular inspiration to me is Dr. Patricia Gurin. Pat is a faculty member at the University of Michigan. She is 88 years old and shared with me that her 90th birthday present to herself is she's going to retire from teaching. She served as an expert witness for the University of Michigan at the Supreme Court during the affirmative action lawsuit. She has been a social justice advocate for over 70 years with a particular focus on racial justice. As a white woman, she recognizes her privilege and has used it to help make better spaces for all people. Throughout my career at the University of Michigan, up until today, she has been a daily inspiration to me. She did things that helped me grow, learn, and be successful. Some of the things that I look for in a leader and that Pat showed daily are she modeled what she talked about by surrounding herself with people from all backgrounds, and she compassionately listened to their stories. She willingly shared her knowledge and expertise with me and others about social justice issues, and she also was dedicated to her own growth and development. Pat helped me find a voice and constantly encouraged my career when I was a young professional. She helped me understand how important it is to remember the women whose shoulders we stand on, and that we also need to provide shoulders to stand on for women who come after us. Finally, she was there to support me and challenge me to be a better person, never letting me give up, even if it was tough, and doing this with the utmost compassion and belief in me. I currently serve as the administrative assistant for the faculty here at Rio. Prior to coming to Rio, I served as the director of housing at Wayne State University and retired from a 30-year career in university housing. I want to share just a few things that I believe are important for women at Rio who want to grow, learn, and become leaders at Rio or elsewhere. This comes from my perspective from being in a leadership position and from my current role. So I think it's important to be seen and noticed by leadership, and 6 things that I think can help. 1, a positive attitude. I believe this is number 1. Organizations want people who have a positive attitude about their work. This goes a long way in how others perceive you and value you in an organization. Take initiative at any opportunity. Initiative is so important. It shows you care and you're committed and dedicated, and shows that you can think outside the box. Perform well. Do your work to the best of your ability at all times. 4, be a team player. Be a positive force on the team. Be a leader when it's appropriate, and be a follower when it's appropriate. Learn about others and their diversity so you can support all members of the team. Own your mistakes. Take responsibility for your mistakes. Own them, grow from them, and do better the next time. And finally, continue your education. Learn in any way possible, whether that is getting a degree, getting additional degrees, professional development, reading. Just learn and share that learning with others. I share all of this to say that from anywhere in an organization, you can make a difference. You are important, you have value. When possible, take opportunities to show your leadership in big and small ways. And finally, as women, remember it is important to build each other up and be supportive of each other in all that we do. Know that I and many others are rooting for you and wish you success as you move forward in your profession and in your life. Thank you. I now have the responsibility, I just have to get here, to introduce our students. So next I would like to introduce Clarissa Cuies, a Rio Salado College of Excellence, who is a recipient of several scholarships, including the Adult ACE Participant Academic Scholarship. Clarice, take it away.
Thank you, Janine. Now it is my pleasure to introduce distinguished panelists, each of whom are phenomenal women leaders. Moderator for today's panel discussion is Rio Salado College Interim President Kate Smith. Our additional panelists are as follows. Dr. Seher Awan, President, Los Angeles Southwest College. Next is Dr. Tonya Drake, Western Governors University, Washington Chancellor, and Regional Vice President for the Northwest region. And finally, Dr. Linda Thor, Rio Salado College President Emerita, Foothill-De Anza Chancellor Emerita, and current Maricopa County Community College Governing Board member. President Smith, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Clarissa. We appreciate you and thank you for joining us today, and thank you for taking on, as Janine said, taking initiative and taking on this role. It's wonderful, so thank you. Okay, panelists, we are ready to go. Let's kick it off. Jump right in with, actually, I'd like to ask each of you if you could begin by just sharing a few highlights about your story and within that highlighting your career. So if you can introduce yourself, share a little bit of that story. And Dr. Awan, if I can ask you to kick this question off, that would be wonderful.
Of course, and thank you so much. So good afternoon to all the powerful, amazing women on this call and all of our wonderful male allies who are joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here, so I really appreciate the opportunity. I am Dr. Seher Awan. I'm the president for Los Angeles Southwest College. We are in Los Angeles, California. And we are the smallest college in the largest district in the country. So just a little bit about our college. Never thought I would be a college president. I don't think I grew up thinking that. So I somehow made it over here and went on this journey. I'm a first gen California Community College student. My dad is from Kenya. My mom is from Pakistan. So I grew up first generation, trying to figure out how to be both American and hold on to the culture that my parents were trying to instill at home. Actually started off as an unpaid intern at a community college. I was actually in a small business development center. I have an undergraduate in business, and a part of my capstone to graduate with my bachelor's was to find an internship. So I found an unpaid internship at a community college at their small business development center, and then they kept me on as an hourly, and I sort of just found the path of going through community colleges in that way. My first full-time, real job was as a EOPS care and CalWORK specialist. And so I really fell in love at that point with education and the power of community colleges and serving underrepresented populations. And so I really decided I wanted to stay in community colleges. I got married and then thought I'd be adventurous and moved to Florida. I hate Florida, so I didn't enjoy Florida very much, but I was there for about 2 years and got a job at Valencia College, which is a huge college in Florida, in Orlando. And I actually ended up using my business degree and switching over to the administrative services side as an accounts payable coordinator. I have a wonderful husband who supported me and saw I was not very pleased and tried to work out in Florida. It didn't work out. So we moved, him and I, back to California and actually got a job in San Jose at San Jose City College as a business services supervisor. I was there for about 3 months before the entire administrative team left. And it was just me and an interim president and hanging out, trying to figure out how we're going to run this college. So I ended up being in an acting VP of admin services role and 9 other roles. They just plugged me into any vacancy. I think I was PIO at one point. They were just wherever they needed. I was like, sure, I'll figure it out. Just go ahead, let's figure it out together. So I got a really big boot camp on how to be a VP very quickly in about 1.5 years, I just kept saying yes, and they kept giving me stuff to do. And then I finally actually got a formal vice president of admin services job in San Diego. So I went to San Diego City College and I was there for almost 3.5 years. And then I got to the point where I was ready for a change, and I loved being a VP of admin services. Never thought I'd be president because I just am not a fan of politics. I am very blunt and to the point. And I was like, I don't think my temperament is not one for a college president. But, I was at the point where I didn't want to do a lateral transfer. And so I thought, okay, I'll go for it. And luckily in 2018, I became the youngest California Community College president in the history of California at 32. I was hired as a college president. Thank you guys. And so it's definitely been an adventure to get here. So that's a few minutes. Hopefully it was about 3, but that's a quick and dirty of how I got to this point.
Wow, Dr. Awan, that was like a career on steroids. Thank you so much for sharing and again confirming some of the words we've already heard about taking initiative. Impressive. Thank you so much for sharing. Dr. Drake, would you like to go next?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I know that this was scheduled last year, right before the pandemic shut us all down. I was really looking forward to the Arizona sun this time of the year because I'm currently located in Seattle, Washington. But I'm super excited to join you virtually. It is great to see so many familiar faces. As many of you know, I spent some time down in Arizona and working for the Maricopa community colleges. So such a pleasure to be back with you. I will say, well, first let me say I identify as she and her. I also identify as mixed race. I am First Nations. My father is Cowichan from Vancouver Island, although I was born and raised in the States. So in the States, I check the box of Native American, but I identify as Cowichan. I also have been working in higher ed. Gosh, now I'm starting to lose track. Like you get to a certain point in your career where you're like, I'm 25 plus, you know, in higher ed. Yes, and so most of my higher education career has been either in community colleges or universities. I will say I had a fantastic beginning to my career working for the University of Washington, but working in a federal TRIO program, which did outreach to communities in central Washington. And so worked with first generation low-income students, primarily Hispanic and Native American communities. And it just really kick-started my, I will say, giving back as far as social justice, access, my commitment to equity and inclusion, and just haven't looked back. So higher education is definitely a passion of mine, primarily because I find that it is the one area that we can really contribute to systemic equity in a way that very few systems can. To give people access to education is such a gift and provides so many opportunities to career advancement, to advance oneself, their family, and lifts their opportunity to workforce. With that, I will say I grew up in the Northwest, so I grew up in Seattle, and it was about that time that I decided to seek some sun. So I came down to Arizona, and I only planned to be there for a couple of years, and I ended up spending about 11 amazing years in Arizona. So I worked for Arizona State University, as well as Gateway Community College and another TRIO program. Spent some time at the Arizona Board of Regents doing some policy work. And then landed at the Maricopa Community College District Office, so right across the way from you all. And so have a great understanding of Rio's fantastic work and have watched you grow and flourished. But my hometown or home state was calling, so I moved back up to Washington, where I became the Vice President of Student Success at a local community college. And then moved to another community college to do some diversity, equity, inclusion work. So the chief CDO for a community college, which was incredibly inspiring to me. And then more recently, I decided to jump into the nonprofit private world of WGU, so Western Governors University, where I became the Chancellor of WGU Washington, which is an affiliate of the university. And soon thereafter, we regionalized. So now I oversee 9 states across the Pacific Northwest, but have never lost that commitment to social justice and the work around diversity, equity, inclusion. So with that, thank you so very much for having me. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Drake. Really appreciate your insights, and thank you for sharing your deep passion with all of us. And we are happy to welcome you back anytime you can make it to Arizona. And now, of course, our beloved President Emeritus, Dr. Linda Thor.
Thank you very much, Kate. I really appreciate this invitation to be part of this panel. And I want the employees of Rio Salado College to know that I am just as proud of you today as I was in the 2 decades that I had the privilege to serve as your president. Like the other 2 panelists, I'm a community college lover. Because of our mission, our values, and in particular, the students that we serve. I have worked virtually my entire career in community colleges, 41 years. I started as a public information officer, excuse me, with the Los Angeles Community College District, Dr. Awan's home district. And Dr. Awan, we can have a side conversation as to whether the LA Community College District or the Maricopa Community Colleges are the largest district in the country. It depends on the metrics that you're using. As I mentioned, I started as a public information officer. My story really is one of those being in the right place at the right time. I had 5 promotions in the first 12 years that I worked for the Los Angeles Community College District. That took me from that entry-level position to being a college president. So, and I was a college president for 24 years, first as the president of West Los Angeles College, a sister college to LA Southwest College. And Dr. Awan, at that time, I was only 36 years old and held the record in California as the youngest community college president. And I'm delighted that you were able to knock me out of that spot. I enjoyed 4.5 wonderful years as president of West Los Angeles College. However, I had my sights set on the Maricopa community colleges because of their national reputation for innovation and service to its communities. So when the presidency of Rio Salado opened in 1990, I jumped at the chance to move to Phoenix. And as has been mentioned, I was president of Rio for 20 years from 1990 to 2010. I stayed that long for many reasons, clearly because of the wonderful college that Rio is and its commitment to innovation and relentless improvement. But it also gave me the opportunity to raise my children in a wonderful community and with a great deal of stability in their lives. Once my children were grown, I did have a decision to make as to whether I would stay at Rio Salado and kind of slide into retirement, or whether I would make one more move when I still felt that I had enough time to make a difference for another institution. So in 2010, I became the chancellor of the Foothill-De Anza Community College District, which serves the Silicon Valley of California. I stayed there until I retired in 2015, returned to my home here in Phoenix, and was immediately lobbied to run for the Maricopa Community College's governing board. I ran successfully for the board in 2016 and had the privilege to serve as president of the board in 2019. I was just reelected to the board on November the 3rd, so have 4 more years of service. And I was extremely gratified that I won overwhelmingly with 909,000 votes. So I feel like I have a lot of wind at my back to continue to make a difference for the Maricopa community colleges and community colleges in general. And I too look forward to responding to your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thor. And let me just say, we're all so glad that you ran for the governing board and so appreciate your leadership in that role. And thank you for sharing with us about your career trajectory. We really appreciate hearing from you, having you here. And I'm struck by a little bit of the parallels with you, Dr. Awan. It makes me wonder if you're going to end up in Maricopa next, but just saying. So let's move on to our next question. And Dr. Thor, I'll ask you to take this question. If you can share with us a little bit about what is your leadership style and how have you seen it be effective? And if you had any tools, leadership tools that you found to be especially helpful.
Well, thank you very much. That's a wonderful question. I don't have a particular label for my leadership style, but let me describe how I hope people see my leadership style. My integrity is extremely important to me. And I've always tried to be very, very honest. In fact, those of you who did work with me may recall that I was constantly using the front page test around decisions. And by that, I mean that we should look at all of our actions and our behaviors as if they're going to be detailed on the front page of the morning newspaper, or in today's terms, on Twitter or social media and so on. And if they were, is there anything about that that would embarrass yourself, your family, the institution? If so, don't do it. That your integrity is extremely important. I also hope people would say that I led and lead with vision and with values and with optimism. I always thought that an important part of being a president or a chancellor was to be the cheerleader for the organization, for the employees, for the students. I also tried to be open to being influenced, whether it was through books. I was always reading business books and transferring some of their innovations into the higher education world by best practices. I was influenced by employees and advisors, and really tried to be very authentic, not assuming that I knew the answers to everything, but that the best decisions came when large groups of people were involved. So in terms of results, in the 29 years that I served as a CEO, I really had overwhelming support of the employees, and also my supervisors, whether they were chancellors or, in the case of Foothill-De, Anza, the elected governing board. So I hope that adequately summarizes what I would consider to be my style.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Thor. We really appreciate the insights around integrity and that being what you have as a leader. Your stake is based on your integrity, about vision and values, and the openness to look outside of education for input and influence. Thank you for sharing that very much. Dr. Awan, I'm going to turn to you. We often, are asked by male allies, how can they support women leaders? Could you share some thoughts about how our male allies could support female leaders?
Absolutely. I love this question, because I think when we talk about Women's History Month and women empowerment, we forget that we do need allies, right? I think it's hard to do anything alone. And our male allies are so important. I wouldn't have gotten this far in my career without being blessed with, male mentors, allies, people who stepped in, had faith, took chances on me. So I definitely think that male allyship is so important. One of the first things I think male allies can do is acknowledge their privilege. And I know that sometimes, I think I've seen it in social media, and I think Trevor Noah just did a really great sort of bit on this about, don't get defensive or fall into that trap of the not all men, right? Well, not all men do this, not all men do. Okay, well, we know that, but I don't know you from any other man. So calm down and understand that, you got some privilege going on, and just acknowledging that, I think, puts some humanity into the conversation. you know, we don't know you from anyone else. If you're a stranger to us, we have to assume what we need to assume to make sure that we're safe, that we're supported, right? That we're doing what's best for us as individuals and as women. It's important to practice sensitivity and support, especially if you see a colleague, a coworker, or even more important, someone who reports directly to you sharing a concern. It is very hard as women to report to a man about something very personal or when you feel unsafe. And especially if you see or feel unsupported, it can make a huge difference. And it can also allow for things to happen that, you know, you obviously wouldn't want to happen. So it's very important to be sensitive and to be supportive and responsive. You know, women, I think we've seen those videos, and I'm sure we've all experienced it, where you're in an uncomfortable situation and you continue to smile and try to get through it. And if you see a coworker, colleague, someone you care about, even if someone you don't care about, some a stranger, that you see them in a compromising situation, it's okay to do a check-in and be like, hey, are you okay? Is everything all right? Because if that opportunity comes up and someone is really feeling threatened, they're going to say, no, I'm not. Can you come and I need your help, right? This person is following me. This person is, you know, making me feel uncomfortable, right? And so it's important to do a check-in. I mean, I'm not going to be mad if you see me looking uncomfortable and you come up and you're like, hey, are you all right? Like, you know, yes or no, right? But that, even just taking that proactive approach, I think so many times we have people who are bystanders, but those bystanders need to be engaged and they need to be vocal and they need to be interacting in a situation where they can make a difference, and where if someone is feeling unsafe or uncomfortable, you know, there is a male ally there to help. I also think accountability is very important. Holding men accountable, other men, is a helpful thing for male allies to do. It's very different if I talk to a man and say, I didn't think that this was okay, or this made someone uncomfortable, right? If they hear, I mean, I'm perceived a certain way because I'm a woman of color and a young woman. I look young, I am young. And so, you know, they're gonna take what they take from my messaging, versus if another male tells them, you know, look, that wasn't cool, or I saw you do this and that person was really uncomfortable, or a coworker, colleague, someone who reports to me has shared that you're making them uncomfortable. I need you to understand that these are the acceptable boundaries of your future interactions with this person, right? And I've had male and female allies come and step up where I've been made to feel uncomfortable in a workplace, and they could see it. Like, I didn't say anything, but they could see it and they said something, right? They came up and were like, so, you know, we need to take a step back, and these are the parameters and these are the boundaries we're putting in place to keep me safe, right? And so it's important, especially as you move up, for male allies to be in that situation. And then I think it's really important to be willing to mentor women. Sometimes we need your voice. We need your male representation and your advocacy. And again, we are perceived differently. And as everyone is judged by their appearance and who they are and where their positions are, even as a president, I sometimes need my white male representative allies to say the same thing I would say in order to be heard. And that's just the reality of the society we live in, right? So your advocacy, your mentorship, and your willingness to be an ally is so important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Awan. Greatly appreciate your sharing and your wisdom in this. And I think you really, you know, put out very actionable items around honest reflection on privilege, around being supportive, being sensitive, around holding others accountability, around willing to be an advocate, around willing to speak up. So thank you so much. I'm going to switch directions a little bit to a very current topic, Dr. Drake. You know, we've been through numerous challenges this past year, not the least of which would be navigating a global pandemic. And so I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit about your thoughts on the impact of this crisis and how to re-engage women. And I think I want to interject that we're all, I believe, aware when we look at the data that the global pandemic has very disproportionately affected low-income earners and women. So your thoughts around how we re-engage women who have been either forced out of the workforce or had hours significantly reduced, or maybe struggling with continuing with their work due to the pandemic?
Well, thank you, President Smith. It is a very timely question for sure, and one that I know as a woman I struggle with also. I was thinking of Jenny's comments when we started this program, and how she talked that each of us stands on the shoulders of the women who came before us. And I think that is so true and so relevant. And I think about how long it has taken us as a gender to make those steps into the workforce. And in such a quick amount of time, within 1 year, that we have disproportionately been impacted by this pandemic. 1 in 5 women leaving the workforce, 5.7 million women have left the workforce this year. And some of them voluntarily, some of them not. And I think we have a real opportunity in higher education to right that wrong. And I think we have a responsibility to help do that, to embolden women to think about what does their future look like post-pandemic, and what do they need to do now to be viable in this new emerging workforce, is an area that we can definitely contribute. I think Rio Salado, I think community colleges, I think WGU are just prime opportunities for us to help women think through those options, because we do offer that flexible opportunity to re-engage, I know we're overusing the upskill and reskill, but I do think it's an opportunity to brush up whatever you do on your learning and degree options, because I think the world's going to look different. And I think we have a lot of catching up to do. And so I will say, wherever I can, I try to encourage women to be bold, to be courageous. And yet I completely understand I'm dealing with 2 teenagers in online school still. I'm the primary person who's still going to the grocery store and figuring out family plans for my families. You all probably can reflect on this year and what your life has turned around to be, and the toll it has taken on your life, and me or someone like me asking you to add one more thing during a pandemic is probably a little crazy. But that's exactly what we need to do. We need to hold each other up. We need to support one another so that we can see the gains that we've made as a gender in the workforce, to go back into the workforce in full force. But that's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of patience, and I think it's going to take a lot of support. But all of those we provide for women, and I think together that we can begin to lift again.
Thank you, Dr. Drake. I hear you really talking about being very intentional as we go through this time, intentional in empowering women to be able to continue in the workforce or return to the workforce, and really being supportive and holding one another up. So thank you so much for sharing with us. I'd like to ask all 3 of you, and maybe Dr. Thor, will go back and start with you again on this next question. Could you speak a little bit to leadership through a social justice lens, why it's important, and what are the ways we can lead to affect positive social and economic mobility outcomes?
That's a very, very important question, and we could probably spend hours talking about it. But I mean, to me, social justice is about human rights, and it is about us being very intentional about addressing the barriers that have kept historically underrepresented people from enjoying all of the fruits and the benefits of our society. Community colleges, to me, really are social justice institutions. I mean, our mission and our values speak to social justice. We have been called the people's colleges. And because of the fact that we are open access institutions, demonstrates that we believe in all people and that all people can be successful with support and access, particularly access to education. That said, as leaders, there's more that we can and should be doing. As leaders, we need to make sure that we are very clear about who makes up our workforce, as well as who makes up our student population now and tomorrow. And we need to be sure that we are identifying and addressing the barriers that are keeping all of our students or all of our employees from being able to reach their full potential. As leaders, we need to be providing forums for safe and honest dialogue. And we also need to be sure that there's room at the table where decisions are being made for all of those voices to be heard. And we need to be sure that we're offering the programming, if you will, both for our employees as well as for our students, that allow for the full development of the social justice perspective, the understanding and importance of social justice. And I'll stop because I know my two panelists probably have a lot to say on this topic.
Thank you, Dr. Thor. I first want to say I couldn't agree more and love every word you just said, but I also think that there might be a four-legged friend who wants to was using their voice to applaud you and agrees as well. With that, Dr.
We're
Draper,
lucky it was only one of the two that wasn't.
yeah. They're like, go mom.
This is the pandemic world we're all living in.
Yes,
right now.
I love it. I love it. It brings out all of our humanity. It's great. Dr. Drake or Dr. Awan, would one of you like to speak to this?
Sure. I would say I would agree with Dr. Thor, of course, and everything she said. So the only thing I think I would add is, systems work is long, it's tough, and we have to be patient, we have to be persistent. And I think there's opportunity to roll in a collective impact approach. In higher ed, we can't do it ourselves. We're very innovative, we're very ambitious, but we also need, the private sector to come to the table. We need the public sector, we need policymakers, we need resources. And so taking a collective impact approach and getting everyone rallied up for this long game, I think is also going to be important to move us forward.
Thank you, Dr. Drake. I appreciate that call out to the collective impact and never tiring from bringing stakeholders together. Dr. Awan, did you have any other?
I absolutely agree with my fellow panelists. I think just a couple things. For me, social justice really translates to intentionality with your leadership. I feel like, especially, you get to committees, you get to group conversations, like, well, there's a problem, we need to fix it, we're outraged, we need to, okay, but what's the intentionality behind it, right? What problem are we really trying to solve? Are we solving the problem or the symptoms, right? And so much of the work is systemic, and to make sure that you understand the starting point of everyone is so different. So bringing equity into this work, it has to happen if you want to increase your student outcomes. And then just as leaders, back to social justice, accountability is so important. The data tells a story, and oftentimes it's a very sad story that hurts people's hearts and hurts the college's self-esteem. Any college, right? No one's perfect, everyone's got their issues, but the data is going to tell a sad story about lack of outcomes, right? And so instead of attacking the data, which a lot of people tend to do, I think as leaders, we need to focus on redirecting that energy into, instead of attacking the data, look at the intentionality of our outcomes and what are we going to do about it, right? This is the data. You don't have to like it, but how are we now going to respond to it? So I'd stop there, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Awan. At Rio, we talk about it as, let's not try to explain away our data. let's embrace it so we can grow and learn from it and get better, and goes back to relentless improvement, right? I also love your statement, are we treating the problem or are we treating the symptoms? And I think that was very succinctly brought together. So thank you so much. Okay, so now I'm very excited to ask each of you this next question. So Dr. Awan, we'll kick it off with you. Can you share with us who is a female leader who has inspired you, and why and or how have they inspired you?
Sure. So I think I've been very blessed to have a lot of really great, women in my life, and female mentors and role models. Of course, I would say my mother, probably the earliest. She's so graceful and poised, and I am nothing like her. So I wish I try to emulate her grace under pressure and her just poise. I'm much more hot-blooded like my dad, but my mother and I are polar opposites. She was a stay-at-home mom my whole life, but I love and respect her and her wisdom so much. So she's probably my earliest female leader. She's still very much a leader in our community at home. But I think recently I had the privilege of listening to Dr. Bernice King at a panel, and she's the daughter of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. And she talked about the power of love as this fierce just action, right? And I tell my campus I love them all the time. I wish them lots of love every week. And I feel like, those soft skills, love, those things that were so undervalued in the past are so important and so needed, because when you do this work, it requires humanity, it requires being courageous, it requires vulnerability. You can't make human connections if you're behind a wall, right? Or you've just shut yourself down and are sort of going through the motions, right? People can tell when your heart's not in it, or you're not being your authentic self, right? But the fierceness and the power of love was something I had never heard it stated as she stated it. And her work, she's done amazing work in following her parents' legacy, but the way she said it was just something that really, it hit home for me, and about how, we get to really be true brothers and sisters and love everyone, not just those we agree with, right? And about the fear of what our society is becoming, because our humanity continues to drain away. And when you disagree with someone, now you personally attack them. And that's not what our society can be built on. That's not how you achieve social justice. That's not how equity is going to happen. If someone disagrees with you and you either bully them, shut them down, personally attack them, different voices are important, right? But the power of love in all of that transformational work, I just found her to be so powerful and inspirational. And if you have the chance to listen to her, she's just a phenomenal woman. So anyways, but she's definitely a leader who I just feel really connected with.
Thank you for sharing, and amen, if I can use that term. Dr. Drake.
Sure, I think these are always powerful stories, and the person who has really inspired me is a former community college president. Her name is Dr. Jean Hernandez, and she's retired now from Edmonds Community College, but in Washington, she was the first female Latina gay president. And I came to work with her because I wanted to learn from her leadership, and I feel very fortunate to have done that. The thing that really inspired me is not only did I leave every meeting that she was in, or even one-on-ones that I was in, inspired, but she also, she would tell me like it is. Like, she would hold me accountable, and she would lift me up, and she would, call out all the things that were right and all the things that we needed to improve. And sometimes that's tough to hear. Even as a strong leader, but there's only certain people, I think, in my life that have been able to really inspire me in a way to push me further and faster. And to me, that always inspires me, not just the softball comments, but the really tough comments that we need to hear in order to lift each other up. And I think that was always her intention, is to lift up everybody around her. And so I also do my best to emulate that with the people I work with, to be a truth teller. No matter what circumstances they are, and whether somebody may want to hear what I have to say or not, to be bold and to be courageous to voice it. And so I will say that's what inspired me and what I try to do or try to emulate for others.
Thank you very much, Dr. Drake. And Dr. Thor.
Uh, well, there's many, many female leaders that inspire me. Excuse me, both in history and contemporary. And I had to smile at the opening slideshow because many of the women that I have thought about as being an inspiration to me were on that slideshow. Whether it's Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Michelle Obama or Kamala Harris. But the one that I want to talk about is my own mother. And she was a child of the Depression, and she was just 23, 24 years old when World War II broke out. And she joined the Women's Army Corps and served our country in that way. After the war, she married my father and became the stereotypical 1950s housewife. And when I reflect back on that period, there weren't a whole lot of options available to women. Yet, in spite of the societal constraints that were put on women in the 1950s and 60s, she was very politically active, including getting, a rabies law passed in the city that we lived in. If you can imagine days when there weren't rabies laws. She was president of her local women's club, the state women's club. She served on the city's planning commission and was the only woman serving, not surprisingly, and subject to a lot of insults and criticism from people who didn't think a woman should be in that role. And all the while, she was always called Mrs. Carl Thor. Women of those days didn't have a name of their own. And although she never went to college, she coaxed me into going to college when I was quite resistant to the idea. And thank God that she did that, because that has made all the difference in my life. And she also had confidence in me that I didn't have in myself. And it was because of her that I applied for that first job as a public information officer with the LA Community College District, because I was doing what women in particular will often do. I looked at the job description. I could do, 9 of the 10 things, but didn't think I could apply because I couldn't do all 10. And she said, Linda, men are applying for that job. If they can do 3 of those 10 things, you have to apply. And she was right, of course, and changed the whole trajectory of my career. And later in life, I wore a sweatshirt that said, "Mother was right about everything."
Thank you, Dr. Thor. And I have to note that I believe I had at one point seen your daughter on here. So if she is here, I think you need a sweatshirt. So thank you so much. This is wonderful, wonderful, all 3 of you. I think I really heard love, truth telling, be willing to go first, and all of those take such deep well of strength to be. So thank you for sharing. So all of you in attendance, we are coming up on our last formal question for our panelists, and then we're going to be opening it up for others to ask questions. Please go ahead and start putting some in the chat if you have some. We definitely have so much more to gain from our panelists. So with that, I'm going to open up the last question, and I guess Dr. Thor will go back and start with you again. Can you share thoughts on how we best prepare our female students who want to become leaders? The thoughts about preparing our female students to become leaders.
That's again another wonderful question. I think we've already touched on a lot of things that we can do to help our female students become leaders. We need to provide mentoring. We need to be sure that there are lots of role models for our students. We need to be sure that we're offering programming that broadens their perspective and allows them to see themselves in a variety of roles. I mean, I think about, clearly I started my career much earlier than the other panelists. When I first started, it was the height of the women's movement. And it was the books that were available to me to read, the presentations that I heard, the professional women that I was able to interact with, that really changed how I saw myself and what I might be able to accomplish in my career. And it wasn't just me, it was the men and the women who were also reading and hearing those things and beginning to process about what changes needed to take place. So I think, again, we've referenced intentionality. It is about being very intentional to making sure in the environment that we are providing opportunities for women to see what their future might look like, to include leadership roles. And it was stated earlier that you don't have to be the college president to be a leader, that we have leaders at all levels of the organization, and we need to encourage that.
Thank you so much. Dr. Awan, any thoughts to add to that?
This is about preparing our female students who want to become leaders?
Yes.
Okay. So I think when we start having conversations about empowering our female students to become leaders, I think we need to bring social justice and equity into the conversation. The reality is our educational system isn't made for us. It's not made for women. It's not made for people of color. It's made for middle income white men. That's the origination of our education system. So when you start looking at the classroom structure, when you start looking at the syllabi, when you start looking at due dates, you have to bring in the humanity, the social justice, and the equity into the work that we do. So, I think there definitely needs to be humanity to the work. Life happens. I've never been a fan. I mean, I teach as well on the side, and things like due dates, I'm very flexible because I know, people are caretakers. They are taking care of their children, their loved ones. COVID's happening. You need to bring sensitivity and humanity into the work. We also need to be cognizant of the fact that, anti-racist, right? And you need to also be sensitive to the fact that women, and especially women of color, are held to a different standard. We're compartmentalized. We're, as many of us have discussed today, gender norms are projected on us. We're mistaken for flight attendants and students and secretaries. I've been asked to get people coffee. I'm like, no, you're meeting with me, but I'll still get you coffee. It's okay. But I've been asked if I'm a student newspaper writer. I'm like, I'm in a full suit. No, you're meeting with me. That's okay. So it's interesting when you talk about females as leaders that we are going to look different ways. We're going to be different, and to bring that understanding into the classroom. And I think most importantly, intersectionality. If we're talking about gender equity and leadership, the importance of race and equity at the front line of our conversations, including LGBTQIA, conversations, the violence against our trans sisters. I mean, all of that is so important. It plays a role outside the classroom. It goes into the classroom, and we have to be aware of that and be sensitive to that as we teach women in the classroom, right? From different ages, demographics, all of that, you have to bring sensitivity and humanity into that work.
Thank you so much, Dr. Awan. And Dr. Drake, do you have any other comments to add?
Well, so hard to follow these amazing, phenomenal women. So the only thing I will add is get your degree, So if you're a student at Rio right now, I say keep going course by course, and you have to finish that degree. And I would even encourage you to keep going. You need your bachelor's and then your master's and your PhD. And so I will say that education will open opportunities for you as a leader, but you need to continue to be persistent, and you need to complete. And so that would be the only additional thing that I would add, is to encourage those students, particularly our female students, to complete.
Thank you. I mean, I think there's so much going on in the chat. Everyone your comments are resonating and inspiring. I have to tell you all, I apparently mistakenly missed a question. So I am so sorry, panelists. I have one more question for you. I inadvertently jumped over, but I actually love ending the formal part with this. So Dr. Drake, maybe you can kick this one off for us. What advice can you give specifically to women who want to advance in their career fields? Is that the question I missed?
I thought you did that.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. I thought we were running out of time, so you just purposely.
No, total
Yeah.
misstep there.
No problem at all. I will say probably the same advice that I gave our students. So I think any female education is incredibly important. So consider advancement in that. I will also say this is no surprise to be bold and be courageous, to use our voices, to lift one another up. And then I will also say plan for your future. Just as we plan tonight's meals or whatever else you're doing, plan for your next advancement. What are those things that you need to do within your community, your profession, your social networks to advance? Just as much as you plan for this weekend, plan for your future, and then take action on that, I think is incredibly important. I will say some more recent advice for my Gen Xers is just put your makeup on and do it. But I will also say for maybe the millennials, it's just put your filter on and just go do it. Right? But the most important is just get out there and do it, make it happen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Drake. Definitely inspiring. Dr. Awan or Dr. Thor, any other words of wisdom and advice?
Sure, I'll hop in. I was excited because I was like, oh, I had some pieces of advice. I thought about it. So I'm excited that we got to answer this question. So
I am too.
I'll be as concise as I can be. So early on in my career in San Jose, my boss, who was the interim president, who's now the chancellor, Byron Breland, fabulous man, he told me, you can't be afraid to move out to move up. So many women are afraid to move to a new college, a new job, a new city. I moved to San Jose. I mean, I lived in California. I never lived in San Jose. I didn't know anyone there. And I moved a month before my husband because my job started. So I was there by myself, right? But I remembered his words, and, and I actually heard those words after I had moved, but still, he pushed me to say, if you want to promote, you may not be able to do it in your institution, and you have to be okay with taking risks. As Dr. Drake said, being bold, taking risks, breaking those barriers, and taking some chances, right? Move to a new city, a new state, go and just take a risk. It's okay. You'll figure it out. You have the skills and abilities to do that. I'm going to go with my millennial hat here and say, haters are going to hate. Just shake those off and don't worry about what other people think. Don't care what other people think. I could care less. People say and do the most ridiculous things about my hair, what I'm wearing, did I gain weight? You know what? It's cool. You can do you. Let the haters hate. They're going to talk about you, whether you're doing good or doing bad. So you just keep on moving, right? And keep on living the life that you want to live for you. And then don't let the perceptions of other people limit your own abilities and potential, because you absolutely can do anything and everything you set your mind to. The beauty of this life is we're in control of our lives. And if you look at it that way, every decision you make can make a change for the better. So if you're not happy with something, change it, right? If you're not happy at home, if you're not happy at work, you're in control. Make the changes you need to make to do the best thing for you. When I talk about work, and I'll wrap it up. I'm sorry. I was like, I'm so excited. I just want to get these things out. But when you talk about this work, it's very demanding. It takes a lot of out of you as a human being, but it's so important not to internalize the work and to make it personal. I know sometimes people make it personal, and we're all human, but you can't take this work personally, because when you do that, you get bitter, you get angry, you get upset, you burn bridges. And if you want longevity in your career, you really have to remember that it's not about you, it's not about me, right? It's always about the students and keeping them at the center of what you're doing. So when you take a step back and you remember when you're upset or mad that you're not here for you're not here for you, you're here for them, it really makes it easier for you to let go of the things you're maybe internalizing and taking personally, and that who you work for and who you serve are two very different things, and to keep that at the center. And I think this is a little unconventional, I think, but my final piece is, don't make the mistake of putting work above everything else, including your personal and mental health. I've done that. I was a young leader. I worked my butt off to get here. And I have years of putting work above my mental health, my physical health, and it took the toll. It took the toll, right? Get a therapist. There's no shame in having good mental health support. And just remember, we're all replaceable, right? You may feel like, I feel like I'm doing fabulous work. I'm so proud of my college and the work I do, but I'm still replaceable. And at the end of the day, if something happens to me, they will replace this position, right? So you can't compromise your personal health, your mental health, and actually living a life outside of work. So, okay, I'll stop there because I'll go on my soapbox. Thank you, guys.
And Dr. Awan, fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Thor.
Well, I would agree with all of the advice that's been given, particularly the parts about taking risks and not taking things personally, which is very hard to do. I used to say to myself, what you think of me is none of my business. But again, it's easier to say than to do. And also about the importance of not letting the job define who you are. And I hope that in the questions we'll have some opportunity to talk about balancing your professional and your personal. But I would add, if you're wanting to advance, study the people and the positions that are above you. I mean, what credentials do they have? What was their career path? And particularly focus on what they're doing that's enabling them to be successful, or even what's getting in the way of their being successful, because you can benefit just as much from seeing what doesn't work as well as what works. And then, as has been stressed, be sure that you get the necessary education. I started in the community colleges with a bachelor's degree in journalism. And while I was working full-time and raising a family, got my master's degree and got my doctorate, and that has made all the difference in the world. I also benefited tremendously from having a very powerful mentor, the Chancellor of the Los Angeles Community College District. So seek out a mentor, ideally one who can directly help with your upward mobility. And then finally, I would say is distinguish yourself. And one way to do that is to look for an unmet need. Whether it be in your college, in your community, and become an expert at meeting that need. I mean, if you think about, say, products, where Kleenex was the first into facial tissue. And even though we now have many manufacturers of facial tissues, we all tend to call it Kleenex. So what you want to be is the Kleenex of a particular area of need, and be the person that they go to when they need that expertise.
Woo! Well, you all heard it here first. I don't know if you're not inspired. I'm not sure you're listening, because woo, that was great. Thank you so much, panelists. I'm inspired, thrilled. I think we've all just love everything that you're sharing with us. It's so deep and insightful and honest and true. So let me hand it over now, Janine. to you for facilitating any questions that have come in.
All right, thank you, President Smith, and all of you for participating in today's events. And Dr. Thor, you gave a perfect lead-in to the first question I have for you, and that's how has professional mentorship played a key role in your career advancement, and kind of how that's happened? So, and I'm just going to kind of throw it out to any of you. So.
Oh, sorry, can you repeat the question? I was reading the chat.
How has professional mentorship played a key role in your career advancement?
So I would say I don't think I've ever had like a formal mentor, but I've worked for enough good bosses and bad bosses, I guess, where I knew what I wanted to be and what I really didn't want to be. And I really learned from both, right? I learned from the good bosses who cared about me as a person and gave me constructive feedback in a kind way. And were like, look, you made this mistake. It's not the end of the world. Let's get you over here, right? And I learned from the bad bosses, and I was like, oh, that's something I definitely don't want to do with when, as I move up, or this didn't feel right. And, so it wasn't really formal mentorship, but I think after a certain point, I've had people who care and invest in me as a person and have encouraged me to, go get your doctorate, go to this professional development, right? So appreciating, supervisors who have cared about me and guided me along the way.
I think my first professional mentorship, most of my professional mentorships have been in programs that I've been a part of. I want to say the first one might've been in Maricopa. I don't know if you guys still have it, but it was like a women's leadership program where I received mentorship. And then after that, I was a mentor for others. But I remember that being my first, and what a great experience that was. I've been in a few other programs also, some of which where I get to pick some of the mentors. I like the areas where mentors can stretch and grow and provide perspective, insight. I will say the biggest benefit to me was the ability to open doors and make connections that I never would have been able to make on my own, doing some introductions, doing some, networking. So it was part of that formal mentorship, but it was also opening some doors for which I just couldn't have done by myself.
Dr. Thor, do you want to share?
I already commented about the fact that I was mentored by the Chancellor of the Los Angeles Community College District, Dr. Leslie Coltai. That was an organic mentorship. It wasn't a professional mentorship program like the Women's Leadership Mentor Program is. And yes, Tonya, we do still have it, and it's now called the Linda B. Rosenthal Women's Mentor Program. At the time, I didn't recognize, nor did he, that we were in a mentor-mentee relationship. Yet when I look back on it, I mean, it was very clear that was what was going on. After he left the chancellorship and he was teaching for UCLA, he invited me to talk to his class. And in his class, I outlined everything that he had done for me as a mentor. And I looked at his face and his mouth was hanging open. I mean, he had just so naturally done that he didn't, even realize what an impact he was having on my career. And I will say he was a Hungarian refugee, Jewish. So he had survived both the Holocaust and then the communist, and came to this country and had his first job selling lawn furniture. So he was one who clearly had compassion for the underdog, if you will. So it wasn't just me, it was many women and people of color, including Dr. Tom Lakin, who was one of the early presidents of Los Angeles Southwest College, who would say that we would never have been a president except for the mentorship of this man. And I have always remembered that I have an obligation to return to the universe the kind of support that I was given.
Well, thank you, all three of you. So I have a question that's kind of it's a little bit of a two-part question. So it was mentioned, balance was mentioned, and how you find balance in your work. And so I'd like you to address the balance issue a little bit too, but also what type of support do you have as wives, and if you are mothers, in your own homes?
I don't understand the question, balance. I'm just kidding. No, I will say, balance, balance is a tricky thing to start with. Like pre-pandemic, I probably was way out of balance. I think we joked that we strive balance. And I will say I probably fooled myself into thinking that I was balanced in some way. During the pandemic though, like I mentioned, I have teenagers. They're both in online school. And so I have a great appreciation for teachers. I already did, but much better now. Two, I trust my kids, but every time I walk in there, they're like on their phones, they're playing games. So I have to be on top of them all the time. And then I will say, I am still the person in the household who plans the meals. I'm mostly in the grocery store, so being exposed to the virus. I am trying to balance work. For me, however, my little secret of the pandemic is I've secretly enjoyed being home with my kids and working. Like I work for an online university. I haven't missed a beat as far as operations. As a matter of fact, I feel like I work more hours now, but I also get to see my kids. And I just thought, how did that happen? And so there are some areas for which that I have found more balance in odd ways during the pandemic than maybe I had before. And so for me, that has been a great thing, but I'm also looking forward to not spending 24/7 in my household with my family.
I agree. I don't balance. I think the idea of having some type of perfect balance is like a fallacy. It is some pretend notion that I think has been projected on women to try to, that makes us just feel bad. I think I pursued it a lot when I was younger, and it's just unrealistic. I don't think balance is something that you achieve. I think it's a spectrum, and sometimes you're going to have to work long hours and weekends, and then sometimes you can stop at 5, or you make the choice to stop at 5, right? But yeah, I don't think achieving some balance is realistic or even supposed to be realistic. In regards to home life, I'm very blessed. I have a very supportive husband, no kids yet, but very supportive husband who has followed me from job to job all over across the country, all over Florida, and all over California. So he's been my rock and just such a wonderful person. He also knows who he married. He's definitely a partner at home. He understands I'm not going to be cooking and cleaning. Like I am working till 9 or 10 sometimes. I'm not going to now get in the kitchen and make you dinner. So he knows who we married. I'm like, I will absolutely order us dinner. What would you like? But I am not going to be, washing dishes at 10. So he understands that. He's definitely very supportive. And, we've been married 10 years. It was 10 years this January. He's been just a rock. And I think he gives me the emotional support that I need because, I'm the breadwinner of our family and he's very much okay. I'm very blessed. He's not, we're both Muslim, and I think culturally and religiously there can be gender and social norms that come with that. But he's definitely been, I would say he's a feminist, and he's definitely been supportive of me in my career. I wouldn't have been here without him. If he didn't want to move, it would have strained our marriage if, I asked him to move 3 or 4 times. So he's definitely been a partner to me. He helps, take care of the house, the clean, doesn't make me feel bad if I got to work on the weekends. Like I'll gush about my husband. He's a wonderful man. So yeah, lucky to have that. And of course I have a really great, my younger brother's really supportive, and my mom and dad as well.
Dr. Thor?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said as well, particularly that there's too much emphasis on balance. I actually think you can cause yourself a lot of anxiety by focusing on whether am I balanced or not. That said, I had a 6-year-old when I became president of West Los Angeles College. And my daughter was born a year after I became president at West LA. At the time, that was such a unique event that the Los Angeles Times did a feature story on this pregnant college president. And I could tell all kinds of stories about the reaction to that. And Dr. Awan, the number of doctoral dissertations have been done on female college presidents with small children. And so far, I believe that I'm the only one that had a baby after I became a president. So maybe that's another of my records that you can break as well. But I want to say that, and when I became president of Rio Salado, my son was 10 and my daughter was only 3. And I remember when I arrived after I was appointed to visit with these children in hand, I could see all of the chatter that was going on the sidelines about, oh my God, she's got a 3-year-old. But I would say that it's because of the children that I had any balance at all. Because when I came in the door at night, I had to put down the briefcase. In those days, you carried briefcases, you know, and hear what happened in kindergarten and find out whether the 8th grade homework had been done or whether the dog had been fed. And admittedly, after they were in bed, I probably went back to work. But the other thing that they did is, you know, forced me to make sure that we took a nice vacation every year, to take them with me places where it was appropriate to do so, you know, to include them in my professional life as much as possible. I also had and have a wonderfully supportive husband. We've been married 46 years. And he always said that that he felt it was his job to pull the curtains on my stage. In other words, to make sure that the things were being taken care of at home to make it possible for me to do what I did. And again, as Dr. Awan talked about, I don't try to be Wonder Woman. While this has been going on, my housekeeper's been here, the gardener, and the mobile pet groomer. So if I can buy it, and instead of do it, I do that.
All right, well, I want to thank you all. That's the end of our questions. And so I'll turn it back to our committee co-chairwoman, Sherry Moore-Williams, to close our event.
And thank you again, everyone, for attending today's event. We hope you enjoyed sharing in this momentous occasion featuring phenomenal women leaders. I think we all can agree and give it up that they have been absolutely phenomenal as our panelists today. They represent backgrounds both professionally and culturally, very diverse backgrounds. As you exit from today's event, we ask that you consider 2 questions. The first is to our female attendees and panelists. What does it mean to be a phenomenal woman? I think in the immortal words of the poet laureate, Maya Angelou discusses in her iconic poem, we can all continue to reflect on that. And to our male allies, once again, what can you do to help support phenomenal female colleagues with whom you work? Once again, I'd like to thank our guest panelists and a special thank you to our Women's History Month Planning Committee. That includes, of course, my co-chair, Rosalie Austin, Janine Bissett, Michelle Reese, and Marissa Tarango. Also, we would like to thank the Rio Salado College Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Belonging Task Force for helping us to present informative discussions such as these events. Again, thank you for attending, everyone. Have a great day.